Hello, Guru Nation. Welcome back to another episode. We're covering biotech stocks on this channel. We go even more in depth on our other channel, the Clinical Research Circle. And we've got the CEO of AzurRx Biopharma, James Saperstein, on. He happens to be Latino as well. I'm not wearing this shirt because of him. It's just the one that was available in my closet, the next one in the queue. But James is also Latino, and we were talking a little bit before we recorded about maybe having him join one of our biotech series for Latinos in clinical research. So touching all brands here, touching all brands with AzurRx Biopharma. But we've got a really exciting podcast for you guys. We're going to talk to James, who's the president and CEO of AzurRx Biopharma. Like I said, he has a solid background in biotech. I'm going to let him kind of give us like a 2-minute synopsis of his career and how he got to this point. And then we're going to dive deep into the pipeline, the GI related things that AZRX has, and kind of use the article that we wrote as just a little focal point for explaining what AZRX is, why people are excited about it, and then we're going to go deeper into it over the next series of videos. So, James, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So why don't you give us like a background of, like a career synopsis? How did you get to this point? I have your LinkedIn profile up. It seems like you've done a lot of different roles with various biotechs, and you're a board member of several the biotech innovation organization. So can you kind of give us a little bit of a background?
Sure. So I'm a pharmacist with an MBA, and I started my career at Eli Lilly. Actually, that's where I met our current chief medical officer, Jim Pennington, when he was a professor at Harvard Medical School many, many moons ago in infectious diseases. And then I spent the next 17 years in big pharma with the Lilly and then Hoffman Roche, Bristol Myers Squibb. What's not on my LinkedIn profile is that Bristol Myers Squibb, one of the things I was most proud of was early in the HIV/AIDS epidemic, working with the United Nations and putting together programming, philanthropic programs through Bristol Myers Squibb. I put together a program called Secure the Future, which it's kind of leading to where we are now, because it's like the early days of COVID and trying to figure out, how we map this out, how we structure distribution systems. And I was really at the forefront of a lot of those things. So moving past Bristol Myers, then I went small to a tiny little company no one had ever heard of at the time called Gilead Sciences. I was one of the first marketers there, and I launched their flagship product called tenofovir into HIV. Got recruited out to Serono, which I moved back to the East Coast, ran the U.S. group metabolic and endocrinology for Serono, and then decided, I wanted to do things on my own. So I went to work in venture capital and founded my first company called Tobira Therapeutics, which eventually was sold for an indication in NASH to Allergan at that point, before they were acquired by AbbVie. In between, I've done a couple of other smaller companies, and then got a call to take a look at AzurRx. AzurRx is in the GI space, and when I didn't know anything about it, quite frankly, when I looked at it, first I saw Jim Pennington's name, and I said, wow, I'd love to work with Jim again. I got so much respect for him. But then I thought back to my career, and I said, look at their product, which was MS-1819, which is for pancreatic, acute pancreatitis, but also for GI disorders for cystic fibrosis kids. And I said, this is very similar to my first foray into pharmaceuticals when I was selling insulin back in the day, human insulin, where porcine-derived insulin had been around for about 85 years. And we were the first human insulin on the market. It was back in 1984. It was DNA regenerative medicine, and people just were saying, why would we want to use this? Our porcine-derived insulin is working great. Well, back then, we were out to replace the porcine-derived product, which we eventually did. And we're looking at the same thing with MS-1819. You've got a pancreatic enzyme replacement therapy that's made from crushed up pig pancreas that's been around for hundred years, if not more.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of antigenicity issues associated with it. And we've got MS-1819, which is more human than what's currently on the market. We make it from yeast enzymes and should be able to replace the porcine-derived products. So my career's kind of come full circle and taking a company like this forward. And you're right, Dan, I do sit on a bunch of boards, but I sit on the Biotechnology and Innovation Organization board, where I sit on a board with, that sets policy for the biotech world. And it's been a lot of fun. I've had a great and interesting career.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm always curious, how does that work? I mean, we always talk on this channel about the importance of networking, and once you've been in this industry long enough, I guess that just comes naturally to many people. But how do you just get a call and say, "Hey, let's take a look at AzurRx"? I mean, what was the context there for AzurRx needing new leadership? Can you kind of give us a little bit of color on that?
Sure. People like myself, we get calls all the time. Not so much for us to go out and look for another job, but also to network. People looking for CEOs or other executives to take on other opportunities. I actually was not working as a CEO when I got a call from a banker on AzurRx, but I was always getting calls, and people were saying, there's an opportunity in Portland, there's an opportunity in Seattle, there's an opportunity in Boston. And believe it or not, I've relocated 31 times in my life. So
Wow.
I was pretty tired of packing and moving, and so was my family. So part of this phone call was, can I just stay where I am? And they said, yeah. I think it's a semi-virtual company. We've got a facility in France. We've got an office in New York. We have our clinical team in California. So there's no set headquarters. So it'd be you traveling to these places. So that was interesting to me. What was also interesting was a turnaround opportunity, a legitimate chance to turn the company around. And that's what I enjoy doing. I enjoy a challenge. And AzurRx certainly was a challenge. They'd been around for 5 years at that point. Stock price was not where the board or the investors wanted it to be. And it was basically a whiteboard for me to come in and just try to change everything. So a banker who knows me well said, are you up for this type of challenge? And I talked to my wife, and because it's a group effort, and she said, okay. And that's
Wow.
why I did it.
Was AzurRx always into GI research?
Correct. They were. The company was founded on this asset that was licensed in from a French entity. And that's how the name Azure actually means blue, or blue coast. That's because the lab was in a place called Langlade, which is in the southern part of France, close to the blue coast of Côte d'Azur. And that's how it got its name. So they were always in the GI space. They had two other assets that I inherited, which were in the infectious disease space, but also related to gastrointestinal disease as well.
I see.
We've since just de-emphasized those assets and gave them back because the company was spending a lot of money there, and I just didn't think they were too far away from the clinic. And I decided to prioritize our money on MS-1819 when I first took over.
I see. Okay. So MS-1819 was, I'm assuming, when you took over preclinical, or was it phase 1 yet?
Actually, it was in phase 2 already. They
Oh,
had
okay.
the company had completed a phase 2 program in chronic and acute pancreatitis. They had a data readout on that, and they had just completed the first readout on a study called Option, which is for cystic fibrosis patients who have GI disorders. They cannot take in nutrients. Most people think of cystic fibrosis patients as young kids who have trouble breathing. They have trouble because they're lacking an enzyme which helps convert the ability to get rid of mucus in their lungs. So they get mucus buildup. But these kids also have gastric disorders as well. The same enzyme that's missing does not allow for them to absorb nutrients. And because of that, these kids have a lot of stools per day. They have diarrhea. They're very thin, and they need to start taking these enzyme replacement therapy products in order to absorb nutrients and start gaining weight.
I see. And then so you joined AzurRx October 2019. Looks like on your LinkedIn, right before, like just a few months before the world changed with COVID. When did you guys get the idea that, FW 1022 niclosamide could be potential application for COVID GI infections? Was
That's a
early
great
on, or
question.
did you give it like a few months after the outbreak, or how did that work out?
Kind of. That's a great question though. So my background, I've been part of or directed 23 drug launches in my career. Most of them, the majority of them, have been in infectious diseases. So I would characterize myself as an infectious disease expert. You're in the space long enough, you really know as much as most infectious disease doctor or more. And when COVID hit, I was asked to be on a task force, basically because I'd been there at the beginning of HIV, and this was no different in the sense that there was no cure. People weren't sure about vaccines or oral medications, what we could repurpose. We knew COVID was going to be a third world problem as well.
There's a lot of similarity with HIV. I had a colleague of mine. He's was around. He had a clinic during the 80s with the HIV epidemic, and when COVID hit, he's still a research site owner. He's like, this is exactly the same sentiment that we had back then, 80s and 90s. So you're seeing the same exact thing on your end?
Same exact thing. So I volunteered at Bio to be on this COVID task force. In parallel with that, there's a friend of mine who owns First Wave Bio. His name is Gary Glick. I actually went to college with him as an undergrad. We took organic chemistry together. Thank God, because I'm not sure I would have gone through.
I hate that class.
But Gary is a prolific inventor, and he's had a lot of success with other companies. His first company he founded was called Lycera, and a couple of other companies since then that he's since sold. When he started Lycera, I got a call. I hadn't spoken to him in quite a while, and he said, "Look, I'm new at this. I'm a chemist. I'm working out of University of Michigan. We have these compounds. How do I find funding?" He knew nothing about this. He's a scientist. So I assisted him. And that was back, I would say 2005, 2006. And actually, a couple of my investors in my first company, Tabira, became his investors. They really liked what he had. So Gary and I have kept in touch over the years. So when I started AzurRx, he said, "Look, I'm looking at this product, niclosamide. We're repurposing it. I've done some bench work and figured out a great way to reinvent this, and we have this micronized version." And he explained it to me, and he said, "We're looking at it for GI. Do you have anyone who might be interested?" Because every time I got a call, he'd ask, "Do you have anyone who's interested?" Through my network. And I said, "Hold on, Gary, I'd like to take a look at it." So I had my team started examining the compound for GI issues. Sure enough, COVID hits at the same time.
Wow.
And Gary says, "By the way, there's this great little study out of the Pasteur Institute in Korea where they're looking at repurposed products. They did a screening, and niclosamide shows the best activity against COVID of any older products. This product is an parasitic that was used for GI parasites."
So I'm sure they had data on azithromycin, on ivermectin, all that stuff.
All those things, including remdesivir, which was the Gilead drug that came out. So at that point, I already had negotiated with Gary on a GI price. But then when COVID came, Gary said, "Guess what? My price is going up. It's going to cost you more." So it took us quite a while to get the deal worked out. But It all happened in parallel. So First Wave Bio is looking at a variety of different indications for niclosamide. We're interested in all of them, but we decided for expedience, let's license in for COVID and for checkpoint inhibitor colitis, which is a very small indication. It's an orphan indication, and that's going to be our first look. So because the vaccines were coming, and quite frankly, I always have inside information in terms of what's going on with COVID. We're always like 2 or 3 weeks ahead of the legitimate news. I also know the Delta variant. I've known about it for a long time. There's a Gamma variant, which is coming post the Delta variant. That's the next one.
Wow.
So I personally know COVID's not going away.
Which one should we be most concerned of?
Well, Delta for sure, because it's
Yeah.
spreading pretty quickly, but Gamma's right on its heels. And I've been saying this for a very long time to anyone who wants to listen. The vaccines are great, and everyone should get vaccinated. It's going to stop people from dying, but it's not the answer. The answer, we're going to have to drug our way out of this, just like HIV. I've always believed that there's never going to be enough HIV drugs because of resistance. Uh, I, it's going to sound a little sick what I'm saying. I've always been fascinated with HIV. I've called it the black monster, the black plague, because the virus just says this just incredible way of mutating, and no matter how long you're on drugs that are working, the drug will find another doorway in. The virus will find another doorway into your CD4 cells and mutate.
Mm-hmm.
What's beautiful about it sounds sick, but what's beautiful about COVID is the virus has found a way to mutate so much more rapidly than
Right.
HIV
Right.
that it's going to keep mutating. That we call them variants. I like to call them mutations, but it's going to keep mutating. What's important here, let me explain this, and I know I'm glad you're filming this, is that when you look at the vaccines work really on these strands, these RNA strands, or we call the spike proteins of the virus. That's where they work. Um, Niclosamide does not work on these strands, on the spikes. Niclosamide works on the round part of the virus. It works on the cell, for lack of a better term, the cell membrane, and it splices that membrane. So it doesn't matter what the spike protein is. Niclosamide will not allow the virus to replicate, and it's going to be very hard for your mutations to come in there. Whereas in the spike proteins, mutations abound all over it because they're RNA strands. The niclosamide works on the virus itself, not the
I
strand.
see. And
So
you're
it doesn't
saying,
matter what mutation or variant you have, niclosamide will work.
uh, yeah. So I'm not sure if you know Dr. Sabine Hazen, out here in California. I actually monitor some of her studies. Shout out to Progena Biome. She's running her own trials. That's her company, and she's a microbiome expert. And this she's basically saying the same thing you're saying. She's doing a whole bunch of studies on the microbiome, and she said, this the virus likes to hide in reservoirs in the GI tract. And when we wrote this article on Latinos in clinical research, uh, on doing the due diligence on your company, we have the same thing, literally the same thing she said, written down here. So there's definitely something there when world class experts are all saying the same thing, basically.
Yeah, and I don't know her, but she's right, and she's right that the microbiome might provide an answer as well. We truly, in fact, the name of our trial for COVID is Reservoir. That's the name of our trial.
Okay.
So,
Ah, yes, I saw that. Now it makes sense.
so I've been advocating for this for a while. Like HIV, HIV hides due to temperature gradients. It hides in certain parts of the body. We believe, those of us who are on the task force believe, well, I'm not on the task force anymore. I should say that I'm off, but we believe that the virus hides in the GI tract. It hides in the lower level of pulmonary tissue. That's why, it is a pulmonary virus. And we believe it also hides in brain tissue and possibly in
Mhm.
cardiac tissue as well.
Wow. So definitely a lot of potential for this FW 1022 phase 2 top line data. It says here on the July presentation, quarter one 2022. Are we still on track for that?
We are, and hopefully, if we get data that's early, and I've been talking to my chief medical officer about this because this is something we did at Gilead early on. That was my idea way back when, which is looking at pooled data. So the study is closed. It's a blinded study, so we can't open it, or it delegitimizes our statistical power in the trial. But you can take a chance. You take a look at a pool of data, meaning that you don't open the data to look at particular patients or specific patients. You look at trends that are happening in the trial, and you present that to the FDA. And the FDA will then do what it wants in terms of review. We as a sponsor, as a drug company, we're not clued in on what the FDA is looking at, but we're giving them a package of pooled data. The FDA at that point, because it is COVID and they are looking for answers, if they see through the pool data based on what they've seen in the past with other antivirals, that they think something's there, that I like to say there's the there, and it's working, they will probably ask us to unblind the data at that point and move us towards accelerated approval.
I
Uh,
see.
but we allow the FDA to make that decision. It's not something
Yeah.
we're going to do.
Where in the process are you with that right now?
We're pretty far away. We've actually just started the study. Our original protocol was looking at just hospitalized patients, and we were only doing it in the United States.
Hmm.
The vaccines have changed that parameter, quite frankly, significantly. There aren't that many hospitalized patients anymore. So we're in the midst of changing our protocol to looking at patients who are severely sick, but not necessarily hospitalized.
I
And
see.
now our patient numbers are starting to pick up. We're also looking where in other countries like the Ukraine and India, where there's a Delta variant that is more prevalent. And we want to make sure that we get all variants,
Oh
and
yeah,
that
yeah.
legitimizes our data.
India. So you're in the middle of that protocol amendment right now.
Correct.
Okay. How many patients are you looking for in this study?
Between 40 and 60.
I see. Okay. And so how many sites do you think you need for to pull that off?
Right now, I believe we have 11 sites that are open. We're looking at more sites.
Okay. All US currently or all over all over?
Right now, the U.S. sites are the only ones open, but we're looking to open up abroad. It's just going to take a month or two. Obviously, there's regulatory authorities that we're in negotiations with.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so in my experiences as a site owner, and I work with a lot of sites across the country, it's been tough to get the COVID patients now. Which is, I mean, I guess is a good thing for the world, but for us doing research, it's kind of tough to get these patients. So I think amending the protocol is actually a good strategy for non-hospitalized patients.
Well, I agree, and it's very political, and that's where some of the similarities are there with HIV, which was very political back, in the early '80s. God forbid anyone admitted that HIV AIDS was an issue. I mean, Reagan didn't even talk about AIDS, until he was forced to. Um, we're looking at sites in Latin America, for instance, where it's just going bonkers down there with COVID,
Yeah.
but politically, these governments have purchased the Sino vaccine, the Chinese vaccine, which we know the results are not great.
Right.
So they're not giving us a lot of access to their patients,
Wow. I
which would
see.
be great
Is that
because,
Latin America falls in that category too?
correct.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So I guess it's positive news that the protocol is being amended. Um, and when do you think that's going to actually occur? You were saying a month or two?
Yeah, we're hoping by the end of July, early August. We've amended the protocol. The FDA has not given us final approval, and we've had conversations with them. In the meantime, we're opening up sites in the Ukraine and India. We started doing that in early June. It takes a couple of months to get that going. You also have to deliver drug to them as well. So, everything is slow now.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but even shipping things are just everything's got to be double checked, triple checked. It's
Hmm.
just,
Hmm.
as you know, supply chain has been called to a halt.
Right. The 505(b)(2) is that anticipated, right? For niclosamide.
It is, but that's anticipated for the checkpoint inhibitor
Ah, I see.
approval.
I see.
It's for COVID. I believe it'll be accelerated approval.
Okay.
If the FDA sees that we're effective, uh, look, the FDA has been great. They've been very criticized, I believe, unfairly
Right.
by a lot of folks who don't know what they're talking about. Quite frankly, they've been great at getting these COVID products out as quickly as they can. So,
As far as the next milestone, I guess what a lot of people are interested in is the phase 2 top line data for the combination MS-1819. Can you talk a little bit about when we can expect those results?
yes. So we put out top line data in June, 18 out of 20 patients. And again, it was very top line because that's the guidance I'd given Wall Street. And I didn't want to not make it. We have our final 2 patients in. So all of those things are being tabulated. We're getting close to data lock on the trial. So we hope to have that data third quarter this year that we can present in the public domain. I know some people who write on blogs, they send me emails. They're telling me everyone's expecting the data. I'm not sure why, because I haven't said it was coming anytime soon. But you're the first to hear. We're expecting a third quarter this year.
Perfect, perfect. Breaking it first here, guys. The internet, don't tell me I don't do anything for you guys. I'm excited about the FW 1022 personally. I was talking to Richard Garr. I don't know. Do you know Richard Garr from Curative Biotech?
No, I know the company, but I don't know him.
Okay, so he was basically he's confirming what you said. They're not doing any COVID related things. They have a couple interesting things, couple 505(b)(2)s. This is an interesting company. They said the FDA is not even looking at anything right now unless it's COVID, more or less, right? So I think that's for AzurRx, that's good news when it comes to FW 1022, in my opinion. So what are you guys most excited about? Are you personally? Um, as of right now.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm excited about 3 things in particular. One, with MS-1819, we've seen the results. We're doing a new formulation, which is the same formulation AbbVie has got with Creon, which is their our biggest competitor. They sell about 1.25 billion a year. So now we have the same manufacturer doing our micronized beadlets. Hopefully we get good results on that. So I'm excited to see those results. That'll come by the end of the year. Then with COVID-19, if our theory is correct, this could be huge for patients and for us, obviously for the company. Honestly, it's not anything we're going to do on our own. We're too small to bring it to market. But as soon as we have positive data, I'm sure some company will come calling, knocking on the door, wanting to make a deal because it'll be a legitimate global drug at that point.
Right.
And I also want to point out we've got patent rights for the next 20 years. And with our micronized version, there are other niclosamides being developed, but not oral formulations, and they don't have our micronized version of it. So you've got to give a whole lot of drug. We're the only US-based manufacturer to have niclosamide with this micronized version. So we're very excited about that.
I see.
And then the
Can you
third
talk a little bit
asset,
about? Oh, sorry.
sorry?
Go ahead. Go ahead with the third one. I want to get back to the micronized
Sure. The
niclosamide.
third asset, which is checkpoint inhibitor colitis, I know it's a mouthful, but the checkpoint inhibitors, better known as Yervoy, Opdivo, Keytruda, are some of the biggest selling products on the market right now. And these drugs, I don't make them, so I'm not making a commercial for them, but they're godsends to folks who have cancer. I mean, it's people who had no hope of living or survival are doing well. A lot of them are. So these drugs are terrific. The problem with them is you do get a fair amount of diarrhea with them. And that diarrhea leads to colitis. And as soon as you get a fair amount of diarrhea, you have to go off the drug. And it's very hard to re-challenge the people who are on those drugs. So we're working with some huge centers, MD Anderson, Memorial Sloan Kettering, University of Mass General. So some of our sites that have signed on already are very excited about this, because if we could treat patients in what we call grade 1 or grade 2 diarrhea, which reduces the diarrhea for these folks and does not lead to colitis and hospitalization, these patients do not have to come off their checkpoint inhibitors. So we're very
Wow.
excited to start this study. We've got some of the top oncologists working with us. They've joined our scientific advisory board. We'll announce that very soon. That'll be an announcement that's coming, because we're still doing all the paperwork. So we believe this is going to work. First Wave Bio has data on proctitis that we've seen. Excellent results. It's their results, so I cannot talk about that yet because it's theirs
Right.
and they're a private company. But we're very excited, and that's why we licensed it in for checkpoint inhibitor colitis.
I see.
So we'll see.
Wow, that is
So we
exciting.
may
That's
work.
actually I monitor. I'm a contract CRA, so I do monitor. Right now, I'm monitoring 2 breast cancer studies. One of them is immunotherapy, and yeah, you see the grade 2, grade 3 diarrhea all the time. Matter of fact, patients get hospitalized. You get some SAEs because of it.
Mhm.
So that's initiated phase 1B/2A, initiating second half of 21.
Correct.
Has it started yet, or just site selection right now?
It's site selection. As you can imagine, we're going through all the IRBs, and
Okay.
everybody's tweaking the protocols, and then we got to tweak it back and send it to other IRBs.
If you still need a
That's
site, I got a site for you. If you need a site.
Well, we'll be in touch for sure. And
Okay.
so, as you know, just IRB and site selection takes 3 or 4 months. So
Oh yeah. I mean, if not longer. So when you mean initiation second half 21, you mean first patient screened?
correct.
Okay, gotcha. And how many patients are you guys looking for in that study?
That's a good question. I don't have the final number. We're looking at between 30 and 55, but that's a
I
question for
see.
Jim Pennington,
I see.
our
Yeah, we'll
CMO.
we'll interview Jim on the next on the clinical research circle. Everybody go subscribe there. As we wrap up, I guess thank you so much for this is a really good interview. I guess there's a lot more we can discuss. I mean, we barely touched on the pancreatic insufficiency, cystic fibrosis. Um, you heard it here first, though. Top line data, quarter three,
Mhm.
quarter three. So can you talk a little bit about the micronized niclosamide? Is that for
Sure.
both FW 1022 and 420?
Yes, it's for both. So niclosamide has been around a very, very long time. It's actually approved in this country in 1982, and it's not used anymore. The problem with niclosamide is you have to give a lot of drug in order to get some effect, because it's not systemically absorbed in the GI tract. So literally goes right through you. You take a lot, or you take it rectally, and it's not absorbed. Gary Glick at First Wave Bio figured out a way to micronize it, make it. It's almost like you talk about nanotechnology, making the molecules so small, but gives it a much larger surface area on a small molecule. So basically, you're giving less drug and covering the same amount of surface area in the GI tract. So you can take more of it. In essence, you can take more drug, you can have a higher effect. So the micronized version versus the normal version of niclosamide, you're seeing almost a 200-fold increase in effect or efficacy with the micronized version. So
Wow.
we stand to that's why it works really in the GI tract and proctitis and checkpoint inhibitor colitis, because you're delivering so much more drug, and it's just taking out, because it works also as an anti-inflammatory. So it helps reduce all that inflammation that you see with diarrhea and colitis, and you don't need steroids either. So it just reduces it way, way down. And that's what micronization does.
Wow, thank you. That's we should splice that up into like a 1 minute lecture. I have before we go, and thank you so much. I know we're going over. I have like a few. I have to ask these questions from the internet. I'm only gonna ask 2 because, by the way, hats off to you, publicly traded CEO of a bio. I don't know how you do it. There's just so much like negativity online. Every single one of these companies I look at, most of the time they have a very strong community. You guys do as well, but there's always these negative people on there. It's just not fair, the kind of things that they're asking. I mean, if they need to watch this video to get the context, the inside baseball. It's not so easy to just do things like that. But anyways, that rants out of the way. This is a fairly good question. I don't know if you can answer it. Is there a timeline on when we can expect news for the Part 1 arm for the first 9 to 18 patients of the niclosamide trial?
Well, that's a good one. I no, I think you're going to see something towards the end of this year, early next year. We have to keep this blinded.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of what I figured from and then the last one from the community, and then I have one that's like inside baseball just for researchers. Investors could care less about that one. But this one is from the investors. Is there any way to get emergency use for COVID GI symptoms without having to wait on FDA approval next year?
That's a very legitimate question. We're looking at that. I actually have a few investors who have emailed me directly who have had COVID and have some pretty severe GI issues.
Yeah.
So once we have enough drug for the whole trial, we're going to take a look at emergency use authorization.
Okay.
Not emergency use, but like what we call a named patient program, so that we can put the patient into the trial and give them drug.
Gotcha. Okay, and then the last question from me. This the investors could care less, but I care, and I know a lot of my audience cares because this is clinical researchers for the most part. Investors second, researchers first. You've been around long enough, right? I'm assuming AzurRx is using a CRO for this study.
Yes.
You've seen the CROs gain so much market share, become so powerful. What are your thoughts on this? Not to say you have a good or bad experiences with CROs, but just are you seeing this trend? Are other colleagues talking about this? Is there going to be a pushback to in-house monitoring? Like what? Just give me a little bit of your thoughts on this.
I got to tell you, Dan, that is a Pandora's box of a question.
I know, that's why I ask.
This is my own personal feeling and opinion. We do have a CRO we're working with. It's a large CRO. I actually like smaller CROs because they're a little bit more efficient. The smaller CROs, you don't have to pay for all of this overhead that comes along with it. To me, what's important is a good project manager, a good medical director, and good CRAs. If you have that in a CRO, no matter what's the size, you can run a successful trial. Again, just my opinion. I've done multiple studies. I've been in situations that I've been very unhappy and have had to go, talk about litigation with CROs because they're not fulfilling what they're supposed to be fulfilling. And then I've had small CROs, specifically in country. For instance, I'll just choose one in Thailand, for instance, where it was an in-country CRO, tiny, 8 people. They were just legit. They were so good. They got a trial done like that, and clean and beautiful results. And so I would like to see the stoppage of the consolidation. I think CROs are getting too big, and you're paying for too much overhead. I rather have CROs where you have people who have a vision for what they want to do and have a passion for what they do and just run trials. I hope it goes back to that, but I don't think it will because you're getting a lot of private equity getting involved, and it's such a legitimate money-making model that you got big money coming in and consolidating everything.
Yeah, we almost should do, if you have time, maybe in a few weeks or whenever your schedule allows, we should just do a podcast on that topic because that's, if you're up for it, I mean, that's something that I'm personally interested in, and investors, again, I doubt they even know. So these guys tweeting on Twitter have no clue what it takes. This is why you guys need to watch, educate yourselves. This is not so easy to run a multi-product clinical trials going on all at the same time. A lot of work involved. So thank you so much, James. I really appreciate it. We'll definitely reach out regarding Latinos in clinical research. I think that's the audience there would be really happy to get you on there. And then we'll follow up with AZRX for Clinical Research Circle. And if you're up for it, I'd love a CRO discussion with you some point.
I would love to do it. I'll just close on one thing. It's all about passion, and maybe because I'm a Latino, and maybe that's what the folks who write on the internet don't get the Twitter world. You've got to be passionate about what you do. The reason I left Big Pharma is because I was so passionate about all the projects I worked on. Everyone used to tell me, you belong in a small company. You really do. And at that point, Gilead was a small place. Everybody there was just passionate about helping people with HIV/AIDS. And to me, at AzurRx, it's all about the patient. The investors are important. Don't get me wrong. And my responsibility is to the investors. But I'm passionate about what I do. I want to help people, and I want to help investors. So I need investors to line up behind us. Stop shorting the stock, because that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help us get the drug out there, and it doesn't help us with our clinical trials.
Right.
So
A good message. I think we need more of that. I'm getting the same sentiment from just about every biotech that I bring on, CEO or VP or whatever. So excellent. Well said. Way to close it out. And we'd be happy to continue discussions with you guys at AzurRx. And thank you so much, James. I'll have James's LinkedIn underneath this video if you want to connect with James. And if you're listening on the podcast, it's in the show notes as well. So thank you guys for watching and listening. Thank you, James. I really appreciate it. And we'll catch you all later. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dan.